kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have
Hello and welcome to Deep Dive on NewsX World. I'm Thomas Porteous, and for this episode we turn our focus to Latin America, a region once again thrust into crisis after Washington's military strike on Caracas and the arrest of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. But this moment did not emerge in isolation. It fits into a long and deeply contested pattern of US intervention across Latin America, a pattern that has shaped governments, toppled leaders, and left lasting consequences for millions of people. Let's break it all down. Over the past 75 years, the United States has intervened directly or indirectly across Latin America more than 40 documented times through military invasions, covert operations, coups, proxy wars, sanctions, and judicial persecutions. From Cuba to Panama, from Grenada to Nicaragua, from Haiti to Venezuela, the justification has often been framed around security, democracy, or fighting communism, and more recently, drugs and terrorism. So how often has Latin America been hit by US intervention? Since 1948 alone, US military or covert action has occurred at least multiple times in Cuba, including the Bay of Pigs, in the Dominican Republic in 1965, Grenada in 1983, Panama in 1989, Haiti in 1994 and 2004, Nicaragua throughout the 1980s, Venezuela through sanctions, and now direct force. And this does not include decades of CIA-backed groups, economic blockades, or political destabilization efforts. But military force is only one side of the story. The other is law. How many Latin American leaders have been indicted or prosecuted by the United States, you ask? At least 15 current or former leaders have faced US indictments or extradition demands. Some of the most notable include Manuel Noriega of Panama, Juan Orlando Hernandez of Honduras, Rafael Correa of Ecuador, Evo Morales of Bolivia, and now Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela, along with his wife. In many cases, these leaders were once allies cooperating with Washington before falling out of favor. This brings us to a central question. Is this justice or selective accountability? Critics point to what they describe as US hypocrisy. On the 3rd of January, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the indictment of Maduro hypocritical, noting that President Trump pardoned former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez despite his conviction for drug trafficking in a US court. Hernandez was found guilty of facilitating the shipment of hundreds of tons of cocaine into the US, yet received clemency. Maduro, by contrast, was captured in a military operation without congressional authorization. The contradiction is stark. Leaders aligned with Washington are also shielded. Leaders who defy it are prosecuted and sometimes militarily removed. This fuels a widespread belief across Latin America that US justice is not neutral but political. Take Panama, for example. Manuel Noriega was once a CIA asset. When relations collapsed, the US invaded, killing hundreds of Panamanians to arrest him. Take Grenada as well, a small island invaded under the pretext of protecting American students, despite condemnation from US allies. Furthermore, we have Haiti, and US troops restored a president and then later returned as part of an international force after another political collapse. Each intervention left behind stability, weakened institutions, and deep resentment. And yet, Washington continues to frame these actions as necessary for democracy. The irony is difficult to ignore, and Latin America today leads the world in prosecuting former presidents, often for corruption. Yet, the region also suffers from some of the weakest institutions, many shaped during decades of external interference. Experts argue that repeated intervention has eroded trust in democracy itself. And as for Venezuela, the immediate consequences remain unclear. Civilian homes were reportedly hit during the strikes, and casualties are still being assessed. President Trump has said the United States will run Venezuela during a transition, including control over oil production. For many across Latin America, this echoes an all too familiar past. The deeper issue is not just Maduro, it is whether Washington can claim moral authority in a region where its actions have repeatedly undermined sovereignty while demanding accountability from others. Latin America is asking a hard question. Can democracy truly be built through intervention, or does it require restraint, consistency, and respect for international law? Joining us now to discuss this situation is Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar, an international relations expert, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Dr. Kochar, for joining us here on NewsX World. Let's get straight into this. How has repeated US intervention over 40 documented operations shaped the long-term political institutions and governance structures across Latin America?
Thank you, Thomas, for this beautiful narrative, and I think it's a very, very searching one because it touches reality, it touches governance, it touches sovereignty, and therefore, what has been happening in this Latin America area, as you rightly said, U.S. interventions have been far too many, and ultimately they have not resulted in making this area more stable, I would say that. And why it is this is because US treats all these countries here as one of its colonies. US considers it likes to be like a big brother here, trying to dominate each and every aspect of governance of these countries. Remember, and it is worth making a note that these countries are independent countries, run by their own people, have their own systems of governance. Some of them are democracies, some of them are anarchies, but all the same, they are different countries and they have their own sovereign freedom, and no country or no independent country would like any kind of outside interference as far its own economic policy is concerned, as far as its own foreign policy is concerned. Now, what is happening is that when you go through the Monroe Doctrine, a previous one also, and the present one being called the Dunroe Doctrine. What is the philosophy behind making this doctrine? And if you understand the philosophy behind the Monroe Doctrine, you would understand why America is trying to indulge in all these things. A Monroe Doctrine suggests that this Western Hemisphere area, where the entire Latin America is there, is very, very sensitive to the United States. And why I say that is because most of the countries are on the border. If you take Brazil, if you take Cuba, Colombia, Venezuela, and all these countries, Chile, all these countries are there. They are in very close proximity to the United States. So any kind of foreign policy which is not in consonance with the foreign policy of the United States will cause an asymmetry. And this kind of asymmetry is not tolerable to the United States. And that is why most of the governments which are formed here are CIA controlled or are manifested and orchestrated by the CIA mechanisms. And that is why we see that if any of these countries don't fall in line with the American thought or with American philosophy or with American foreign policy or taking into account the security considerations of America, they are going to face either a regime change or an operation like the one you mentioned in
Okay.
Panama in 1989, or General Noriega was picked up in the
Yes.
same manner as Maduro has been picked up now. So that has been the apprehensions of the United States, because United States major enemies, China, Russia, and Iran, are at a distance away, and the external commands of the United States. That's why you see, United States has a central command, uh, and it has got more than 180 bases outside of United States, because they want to control
Yes.
all the elements which are inimical to the dominance of United States. And therefore, Latin America is like a Achilles heel, I'll call. It is like a soft spot for the United States, because anything happens
Okay.
here has a direct consequence on what United States would like uh, it to happen in the manner it would like it to happen. So wherever we see, if you carry out a case study of any of these countries which are in neighborhood of the United States, and the moment they go astray or they don't follow the diktat of the United States, they are going to face this kind of an action.
Okay, Dr. Kochar, at least 15 leaders, Latin American leaders, they're facing US indictments or extradition requests. How does selective prosecution affect perceptions of justice and political legitimacy in the Latin American region?
There is no legitimacy here. A rule-based international order is just not happening here. It is the might is right, and whosoever has the power to orchestrate these kind of things, and that is the United States. We have seen it is not only Latin America. Look at the Middle East also. Look at Iraq. Look at Afghanistan. These countries have also been impacted by a similar kind of policy of the United States. So I don't think there is any legitimacy. And who's going to question United States? You tell me. Today we say that whatever action United States has done in Venezuela is illegal. Who's going to testify it is illegal? Because the International Court of Justice is defunct. The International Criminal Court has got no jurisdiction. United Nations Security Council, which is the main body, which will decide whether anything is legal or illegal. Uh, United States has a veto power there. So, how do we, sitting in our part of the world, try to understand what United States is doing is correct or wrong? Because moment if you do it you in this manner, if supposing if any of the countries in the uh, global south, I would say that, and if they are doing this kind of a thing, then I think United States comes very heavily on all of us.
Yes.
But the same rule does not apply to the United States, and that is why I think it's a very disturbing trend. Because today, what we are seeing, this international rule-based order is been thrown to the winds. And tomorrow, if China also attacks Taiwan and takes over Taiwan, what justification has United States got to intervene there then? So these things are very disturbing for the peace of the world. And as somebody was saying some time back, are we
Okay.
looking at World War III? Because all these things are taking us to an era of a world war. And today, what we are seen in 2025,
Okay.
and we have entered
Dr.
into
Kochar, I just
2026.
okay. Did you? I'm just going to interrupt you there. Apologies. But what to what extent does the United States practice of shielding allied leaders while prosecuting opponents undermine trust in democracy and reinforce political instability in the Western Hemisphere?
This is a very this question is a very a deep one. I would say that it is it cannot be answered in a superficial manner. The reason is that uh, who is to decide that what is right or what is wrong is the people of the country to decide, or if there is an outside power like the USA to decide what is good for their country or what is bad for the country. A question of legitimacy and uh, selectivism will only come into play when you start deciding the destiny of a country which is not yours. You have no stakes otherwise in the country. The
Okay.
ethnicity is not the same. The system of governance, the people are different. So that is, I think, the larger question to address. That who gives the right to a country to intervene into another country when that country has not asked for your intervention. Supposing I ask you, for your help, then I'm justified in asking you to come and help me. But if I'm not asking for your help, then how are you justified to come and help me? That is the
Yes.
larger question.
And you know, can external enforcement of democracy through military strikes, sanctions, and covert operations succeed without sustained institutional reform and local political buy-in, as highlighted by the Caracas attack on Nicolas Maduro?
See, we are trying to weaponize everything today. As you said, this sanctions and all these kind of measures are being employed to coerce a country, to force a country to accept your point of view. These are not legitimate at all. And what Donald Trump has done is it doesn't even have the approval of his Congress. He has taken a unilateral decision without taking into account the people who have been elected by his own people of the country. A selected group of people, 8, 10 people in Trump's coterie or Trump's cabinet decide that what is to be done. As far as America is concerned, they don't even take into confidence the other people of the party or the opposition party also. It is not a collective decision. So when you are asking me about democracy, what kind of democracy is this? This is like a dictatorship, because in a democratic country, everything happens for the people, by the people, and of the people, because that is the definition of democracy. Where are we getting at? And what kind of example USA is going to set for the whole world? Because if America is going to do that, then on any other country will justify it. Now you see what will happen in Gaza also. When we talk about a two-state solution, it has already gone out of the window, because the West Bank is being populated now by the Jews, and they are going to take over the West Bank after some years. Where do the Palestinians go? That is a larger question. I think it is very unfortunate. I am very, very glad that your channel has raised these very searching issues, because these merit a very large debate, a larger debate, I would say that, and in which all the multilateral organizations have to come into play now. Otherwise, there is no need spending so much of money on the United Nations and all its tertiaries, UNICEF and all these UNDPs and all that, when the concept itself is making the UN absolutely redundant today. Because you see, any conflict which is happening, UN is expressing helplessness to intervene or stop that conflict. Then why are we having the UN? 1945 Charter of the UN needs a relook. A review of the UN also needs to be done in a manner that Security Council reorganization needs to be done in case you want to establish an international based rule order. And if you will not have any international based rule order, then
Okay.
then every
Dr.
country will do
Dr.
what
Coach,
it wants to do.
Dr.
Yeah.
Kochhar, thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. It's always a pleasure talking to you here on NewsX World. But that is all that we have for this episode of Deep Dive. For more updates on issues that matter, stay tuned here on NewsX World. Thank you.